with looking at your arbitration agreements, whether you want to put a new one in place or whether you're revising yours, a good thing to do is also check on all your wage and hour policies. Take a look at what your practice is, what your policies are, and ensure that you're up to date. So here we've kind of just outlined some of the common ones that we recommend that you're checking. So the wage order section 7 has a list of very specific record keeping requirements that are all outlined here. And as a reminder that you need to keep them for 3 years, but a lot of the statute of limitations can go back to 4 years. So it is, recommended that you can keep them for 4 years and be sure that you have all of these items here. And one of the items here I want to point out is specifically for time records. And what that is to keep in what's the punch in, punch out data. You want to keep track of the beginning and the end time of each work period, the in and out for meal periods. There's an exception there if all of your operations cease, split shift intervals, and total daily hours. And one thing you do want to be sure, and it was mentioned earlier about payroll companies and these different vendors that you may be using. You don't want to rely on your payroll keeping system or company to keep any of these records. You need to be sure as the employer you are keeping them, you're maintaining them. An important thing I see often is the wage statements are different from your payroll reports. And a lot of times the payroll companies will just pull your payroll report, but not the actual wage statements. And that is something that you do want to make sure you're keeping. If you're changing your timekeeping system, your payroll company, be sure you pull these documents or have some sort of system where you can go back and get those documents. A lot of times we see, well, I don't have access to that anymore because we changed companies or that company no longer exists. So be sure that you are keeping and you're pulling these records because they could really go a long way in defending any potential cases. Now, with your timekeeping system, there's no requirement for a specific type of timekeeping system. It can be electronic, it can be handwritten. So there's some considerations here to be sure if you're keeping your time records electronically, there's some wage orders to make sure that you can retrieve them in the state of California and that they can be printed in an indelible format. So there's just some considerations to be sure, but you can definitely have an electronic, the California wage orders don't require it one way or the other as to whether you want to keep it electronic or paper and pen. And a quick reminder on what goes on your wage statements. So there are a list of items that do need to go on your wage statements. Here we have a little sample, and one of the, I guess not so new anymore, but relatively new additions is to be sure that you're including how much paid sick leave is available. And that can just be done with a simple line item that says paid sick leave available. And again, be sure that you're keeping your wage statements, which is different from those payroll records. And then just moving on to a couple more points that we see often, those common issues that come up with PAGA litigation. And one of the big ones is meal breaks. So when an employee works more than 5 hours, they're required to get a 30-minute unpaid meal break. You want to be sure that first meal break is no later than the end of the 5th hour. And the second one is no later than the end of the 10th hour. And I love this chart right here because it really breaks down what that fifth hour means. So you're not sitting there counting up. So just be sure that you do have that policy in place and that your different policies and procedures are up to date. You can, that they are unpaid, they're being recorded. As we mentioned earlier, you need that punch in, punch out data, that you have an acknowledgement in place. And this is a great time when you're reviewing your policies, all the different forms that the employees are signing. That meal and rest break acknowledgement policy is one that you want to be sure is up to date and that your employees have signed it. Another item that many people do have is if an employee works more than 5 but less than 6, they can waive their meal break, their first meal break. Now, that meal break waiver does not have to be in writing, but it is highly recommended that they are. And that's something that you also do want to track along with your arbitration agreements, who has and who hasn't signed an arbitration agreement. Something else to track for your employees is who has and who hasn't waived their meal breaks. So you can keep track of that. And a meal break waiver is different than an on-duty meal break, which is likely not accepted in restaurant settings and most settings. And that's something that we would recommend that you discuss with counsel to see if an on-duty meal break does apply for your specific industry. And we also get our 10-minute rest breaks, and those are paid. Employees should be getting them every 4 hours or a major fraction thereof. They do not need to clock in or clock out for those, but they do need to be relieved of all duties. They should be able to leave no matter how, it's only 10 minutes, but you want to give that employee the option to leave and do what they want with those 10 minutes. And then this is just a nice little chart to tell you how many 10-minute rest breaks based off of the number of hours worked. And a quick reminder on the premium pay is that there's a maximum of 1 meal and 1 rest premium break per day. So if the employee misses 1 meal and 1 rest, they would get 2 premium pays. But even if they miss 1 meal and 2 rests, they still would be getting the 2 premium pays. And so just be sure that you are giving your employees their premium pays. That is something also going with that payroll company. Don't just assume your payroll company is automatically looking to see whether or not the employee took that meal break and automatically giving them that premium. You want to be sure that it's being done and while you're auditing all of your procedures there.